Gifted Talks Fundraising offers you a seat at the table for a relaxed chat about what it takes to build successful giving programs. Marshalling decades of practical hands-on experience, the Gifted Directors provide helpful advice and top tips for achieving your fundraising goals. Welcome, Amy. Welcome, Chris. Back to Leamington Spa. Here we are at 1 Mill Street again. And today we're going to have a good time talking about campaign leadership and more particularly campaign management and that partnership between volunteer leaders and your campaign management team that have got to live this 24/7 to get to target. And gosh, we've all played these roles, have we not? Chris, you've been a campaign manager.
We've all been there, absolutely.
Yeah, you've got the scars.
We've got the scars. Amy's done it more than all of us, but you've put it a long time, many years ago. When
so thank you for making me feel
computers, but
yeah. You know, we did. We used to. I mean, seriously, we used to run campaigns using shoeboxes and cards. This was in the days pre-fax machines. Did anyone even remember what a fax machine was?
Probably more efficient than it is now.
Well, it was in some ways.
But you knew where everything was without having to spend half an hour searching on a computer for it.
No, that is true. I used to carry a little. Anyway, it's a long story short, but it shows you how some things have changed a lot, but actually that chemistry between the influential volunteer, the one with the little black book that has access to the prospects, that is obviously very vested in seeing the campaign succeed, and the if you like, the administrative side, the campaign manager, who's there to make sure that volunteer and team of volunteers, their time is used effectively and that the program is run according to schedule to get to target. Because funnily enough, Amy, isn't it so that people don't have on the top of their list when they wake up every morning, today I'm going to fundraise, do they?
No, they need somebody to keep driving them on, don't they? And make sure they're doing the right things at the right time.
Yeah.
And not...
So life gets in the way sometimes of a good campaign, and your campaign manager is really important just to keep things on track. And we know Chris has got a good sporting background, so probably fair analogy there to say they're very much a campaign manager, a coach, rather than the principal striker of the football team, or whatever the lead opening batsman.
They're the people who organise. So a coach teaches, manages in terms of people's times and where they should be when and what they're doing. He sets everything out. She makes sure that whatever they set out to do on the day, they do it. And in a sporting context, that means they're better prepared to then play their sport. Once they've stepped across the line, there's nothing a coach can do, in terms of how they perform. And it's really no different in fundraising context. Once a campaign manager has coached the volunteer or the senior executive, the head teacher or the dean or the artistic director of a theatre to go and do what they need to do, which is engage with potential major donors, there's not a lot the campaign manager do, except, I suppose, in the same way as in the football pitch, the coach can make substitutions. The campaign manager can step in at the end and just make sure that the final piece is delivered. In other words, is there going to be a gift coming from this or not at the end of the day?
Yeah, and all the crucial pieces which the finance director or bursar in the school will be asking, what's the cash flow? When are the gifts coming in?
Yeah.
When can I make that gift aid reclaim and get the money back from HMRC? They're all questions the campaign manager should be able to answer if they're on top of their admin. But Amy, some describe campaign managers, in fact, I think it was a very eminent American fundraiser, even before my time, Carlton Ketchum, he described them as being the insistent voice, and he wrote a pithy piece which we often use. Could you describe to us what he said and what were the key messages there?
It's about having that one person that drives everything forward, isn't it? And like you say, Chris, being the organised person that makes sure we're pushing along, we're pushing to schedule, and that we are focusing on what needs to be done now to keep things moving. And there's loads of tools we use to do that as fundraisers as well. I really like, for example, to use the scale of giving and the gifts we need and the number of each of those and map prospect names against those. And whether that be, individuals, corporates, trusts and foundations, it helps to focus the mind and
Definitely
say,
does.
okay, we need one gift of £1 million and we have 3 potential prospects. Let's focus on drilling down on that and making that happen. And it's also really good for governing bodies, the volunteer campaign leadership, to see okay, we do actually have an idea where this money's coming from.
Yeah.
We're not just plucking this out of thin air, and it focuses the team. So that insistent voice is driving everyone forward with the key tasks that need to be done now.
Yeah. And there is quite a challenge because it seems, as a campaign manager, this is a paid person, and it is a very administratively demanding job, organising various meetings and events and activities, but also getting things in place to report back and thank donors, organising the promotional materials. I mean, there's a lot involved in that. And so often everything is urgent, isn't it? I think a good campaign manager, though, is able to discern the important from the urgent.
Well, I think if you look at if you take a picture of a wheel with spokes, the campaign manager is the hub of those spokes, and the spokes all represent different things. One is briefing your lead volunteers to go and secure major gifts. Another is organising the information events that are going to gather the lower level donors all together to hear the message. A third is the production of all the right marketing, fundraising collateral that you need. The fourth is the reporting mechanism, etc., etc. And the campaign manager is the person that sits in the middle of all of that, is in effect the hub, and makes sure that each of those spokes deliver properly. A wise man, sadly probably you, Andrew, once said to me that good fundraising was organised common sense. And to have organised common sense, you need somebody to organise it. And that somebody is the campaign manager. Ultimately, a good campaign manager just makes sure that every day the things that should be happening do happen. Because we all know in our own lives, it's very easy to do the things that we want to do, that we find easy to do. Sometimes it's more difficult to do the things we know we have to do, and we'll find every excuse in the world we can to put them off till tomorrow. When you come to being in a fundraising campaign, you can't put them off. So if you've got somebody behind you saying, right, today you're going to go and see this person, and at the end of it, we need to know whether they're going to give, whether they're not going to give, or whether you think there's actually a need for they're going to come back with a number of questions that we can't answer there and then. If that's the case, come back to me. I'll get you the answers. We'll set up a meeting for you to go again. And a good campaign manager takes on all of that responsibility. It's a pivotal role in any campaign. And quite frankly, without somebody doing that piece of work, no campaign's going to work properly.
It's one of those cornerstone partnerships, isn't it? Campaign management. It's really interesting because I'm trying to sort of set out an example. I was explaining to somebody else, a friend of mine, what on earth I've done for 30 years and what does campaign management entail. And I said, well, imagine a situation where there's been, over the last 2 weeks, let's say, there's been 3 events. Each of those events have been held in the evening in someone's home, to which, let's say, 20 or 30 people have each come to. So that's 90 possible prospects have been through now that information event process. At the end of that event, they've all signed their little response card saying, yes, I'm interested to give, no, I'm not, or come and chat to me more about hosting another one of these events myself. Those responses then all need to be actioned. So let's say half of them have said, yes, I'd like to make a gift. So here we are, with after those 3 events with, 30 people that need to be personally followed up. Not always by the campaign manager, but maybe by an ambassador, another volunteer in the team. But those appointments need to be made. It needs to be done in a timely way. Because if you leave it a month, they've gone. Their whole points, all that effort's been wasted. So the campaign manager's got to focus on that urgent and important task. But then also your campaign manager is thinking ahead, is thinking, well, but what about the events next week that we've got, and the week after that, and the briefing of those hosts and the getting out of those invitations. Meanwhile, they need to record all this information. They need to get the gifts signed onto the pledge cards and onto the spreadsheets and reported back to the bursar, and the gift aid forms completed, etc., etc. And
they might
the
be
thanking
writing a
process.
Newsletter
They're doing newsletters. Exactly.
Making sure trust applications are in on time, meeting
we've got
deadlines,
grant applications.
I once for a very large organisation, I was working in house, and they were on the stage 2 of their lottery bid, and 2 days before it was due to go in, they were missing one crucial piece of the supplementary information. And I asked around, and I asked everybody that had been driving this. I hadn't had that much to do with it, but I was reviewing it. I said, right, who's producing that? And they all looked at each other as if to say, well, I thought you were, I thought you were, I thought you were. So the campaign manager, I wasn't officially a campaign manager, but I was there doing that in-house job. I said, right, I'll do it. And I ended up staying a few hours later on. I got the spreadsheet in, it got in. What happened? They got a few £1 million worth of heritage funding. If they hadn't submitted that, it wouldn't have got to the panel.
So
and that
was the important task that was also urgent that needed doing.
Yeah.
It can be the sort of job that can totally consumes you 24/7, basically, if you're a good campaign manager in the middle of a major capital campaign.
Well, I'd go one step further. It should consume you.
Yeah.
Because, everything is your responsibility, but it also isn't, insofar as there are people around who should be doing the front end delivery. And I think the other art to being a good campaign manager is to accepting that you are that vital cog. You're not necessarily the glory hunter.
Yeah.
In all of this.
So when there's a win, a success, a major gift comes in, what do you do as a good campaign manager, Amy? Celebrate. Always a good point. Never miss a chance for celebration.
What do we always say? Success breeds success,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So let's celebrate. Let's use it to motivate the team and to build some momentum. And
so even though even though, as Chris has said, you may have written the application, fought tooth and nail to get all the vital bits of information in, sweated through weekend after weekend to get that to happen.
We congratulate the clients.
Exactly right. The champion is the volunteer.
Absolutely.
And when we say celebrate, we don't mean go to the pub and have a bottle of
bubbly. Sometimes
on our own. What we mean is, firstly, let's contact everybody involved with the campaign to share the good news.
Yeah, because good news does travel fast.
As Amy says, it motivates.
And you know what? I've seen good campaign managers hold back snippets of good news to share at key moments, particularly Friday afternoons, I find. Really gives everyone a lift, doesn't it? If you've got something to report back. That's why those sort of weekly bulletins can be so helpful. And also congratulating people that have done their 5 asks, or there's some milestone that's been achieved.
If you want to run a really well-structured campaign, and campaigns should be well-structured, properly planned, with defined actions, to a campaign plan, to a campaign strategy, then exactly that, your group of 6 people on a campaign board, development board, they don't need to sit around a table and pontificate for 2 hours every month.
No.
What they need to do is identify, meet, cultivate, and ultimately ask, but with a small a, their 5 prospects. The campaign manager is the person that says, right, you've met 3. When are you meeting the last 2? Is there anything I can do to help you set up the meeting with the last 2?
Yeah.
What information will you need?
Yeah.
Because when that person's done 5 and hopefully has got 5 gifts, but let's say they got 4, that's a cause for celebration. And the campaign manager is the first person to say to the boss of the organisation, you might want to give volunteer A a quick call to say thanks on getting your 4th gift in. That's brilliant.
Yeah. That's a good point. And it's very motivational, even though behind the scenes it's been the campaign manager that's doing the sort of coaching and supporting to get the chairman to make that telephone call, I guess.
You said it before, Andrew, good consultants. If it goes brilliantly, the client takes all the glory. If it goes badly, we get all the blame. It's the same with the campaign manager.
Well, you've been there, haven't you? When you get to the end of a campaign, target's been achieved, and in a very nice way, the client might turn and say, "I'm not really sure what we paid you to do." And you go, "Well, that's good, because actually, if you'd seen me doing the kicking the goals, I'd have failed. But I've been there every step of the way with you." And
to use a cricketing analogy, they always say about my position as a wicketkeeper, the best wicketkeepers are the ones you didn't notice on the field. And it's very true with the campaign manager. If the campaign manager has done their job properly, everything will have worked like clockwork.
Yeah.
Every meeting will have been held. Every information event will have been properly staged. The money target will have been achieved, and the campaign manager has done his job.
So the challenge out there for many of our clients is, how do I identify this magic person who could be our campaign manager? What sort of qualities am I looking for? What sort of experience do they need to have? Have they been campaign managers before? And we've all been invited by our clients to be on interview panels and to help answer or square that circle for them. What sort of qualities would you say are essential in a campaign manager, or what would you be looking for in interview when you're asking questions about people's professional backgrounds?
I think number 1 is resilience, isn't it? For me, to have that, in fundraising can be tough, and you have times when you're sure that grant is going to come in and it's 6 figures and it doesn't.
No.
And you've got to be the one that puts a smile on your face and motivates the team and says, hey, we can still do this. We're going to reshape. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. This is our new strategy. and not let it get to you.
Yeah.
It's the day in, day out grind, and you have those lovely moments where you can then celebrate with the team. But it's the resilience to keep going when it seems really, really tough, I would say, is my number one.
So you'd be looking for that in the candidate's background in some way, that capacity to
and
keep going through the dark night, as I think the describer.
Yeah, and how they present themselves in that way, really.
Yeah.
You know, asking them how they would meet challenges head on.
And that can be outside the professional domain. They may have been
Absolutely
challenged in some way personally and been able to prevail and keep going. And that's a good quality to see in a potential campaign manager. What about you, Chris?
Resilience is, as anybody who's in the fundraising industry, you've got to be resilient. You've got to be tough enough to take the knocks and ready to take the celebration. We've talked, the word organised has been used before. You've got to be very organised, which means you've got to be very thorough. You've got to be very detailed.
Yeah.
So you've got to be prepared to do the hard graft, the boring stuff that's going to make sure you're organised, as well as the glitzier, more glamorous stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ironically, to be a brilliant campaign manager, you don't necessarily need to start out with somebody who's got a fantastic fundraising track record.
No, they don't need
You've got to have a great delivery record.
Yeah.
Okay. We can learn things like our book and other great webinars and publications out there can teach people the fundamentals of good fundraising. And if you've got a good campaign director, one of us guys, or somebody who's been there before, seen lots of campaigns, you go to that person for the advice and the guidance. But in terms of the day-to-day delivery, you've got to be thorough, you've got to be organised, and you've got to be disciplined both in yourself, but also in keeping your team of volunteers on track.
Yeah.
So having good organizational skills, being efficient with your time management, being a good communicator, evidenced, but not just in how they write, but how they present that vision. A good thing in an interview for a campaign manager is to give them the case and say, right, can you give me a 3-minute presentation on the case, and just see how they really communicate and present the benefits of that vision. But actually, it's an interesting role as a campaign manager as well, because it's so often one of those jobs that you don't need all the time, in an organization. You might have a campaign manager with you for a year and then they'll move on. So you don't need to think about them as being somebody that will necessarily be on your team forever. Equally, you may be developing a major gift program and find a campaign manager is just the resource you need.
And sometimes clients run multiple campaigns, don't they? So,
yeah.
Some of our big hospital clients in the past have had one after another, and
True.
team will be in-house delivering on different projects one after another.
Yeah. Look, I think it's very important that everybody recognises the particular skill set the campaign manager has. I think very often we see with the clients when they've got somebody in-house who's a very good fundraiser and very good at relationship building, is they may not have the other skills required. And that again, where we may come in sometimes to make sure they stick to the script. If there's a plan, have they done everything? If their job this week was to do these 10 things, have all of those 10 things been done? If one hasn't, why not? And if there's a perfectly valid excuse, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's been rearranged.
Yeah.
It's that sense of discipline.
Yeah.
And we've all worked in-house at different times in our careers where we've tried to apply that discipline to the volunteers that we work with, and some embrace it and some don't embrace it. And it's when they don't that you have more of a challenge as a campaign manager. You need to go to your senior volunteers, the campaign chair, or you need to go to the senior professional, the head, the dean, or even your director, as in the consultant who's maybe did the study and has driven it forward, and say, look, I've got a problem here. This person isn't playing ball. And I'm at the level I'm at, they're not going to respond to me. They need it to come from somebody else. So you've also got to be realistic. It's a great way, I think, being a successful campaign manager and delivering 2 or 3 or 4 very good campaigns as a relative youngster is a great way to build a CV and then move up, because you learn so much on the job.
Very true.
Yeah.
And it really is an opportunity for somebody who wants to get involved in fundraising to come into what is a challenge, but is also proven to be the most effective way of getting high numbers.
Yeah.
And it's also very good. It's a very easy job when you're managing somebody who is a campaign manager to measure their output.
You can't hide from the numbers as a campaign manager, can you?
No.
But they're not the number. that everyone focuses on is the amount of money that's come into the bank. Obviously, there's the number beyond that, the amount of money that's been pledged. But there are other numbers that matter to campaign managers. For example, the number of people coming to information events, the number of ambassadors that you've got, the number of grant applications that have been made, et cetera, et cetera.
The number of meetings with prospects.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, your communication numbers. And if you're going to assess performance of campaign managers, it's, the temptation is just to focus on what's in the bank. Finance directors, listen carefully.
Yeah.
Actually, that is not the only indice to use, is it?
Well, in the IDP benchmarking report,
Yep.
2021, which we did with IDP.
So this is the independent schools
sector benchmarking report. There was a section on ROI, and we were very clear to say on that bursars would not just judge their fundraising professionals in school on the amount of money they receive. It's things like the number of meetings they've had with prospects. If you want to put KPIs, fundraising is not an exact science at any stage. You never know whether there's a £1 million donor who's going to come in or a potential £1 million donor who's going to say no. Right? So you can forecast, but it's always going to be very loose. What you can say is, I will have 50 meetings this term with potential donors. And if you don't, then you're not doing your job, if that's what you've agreed to do. I will raise you £500,000 this term, because you can't control that.
It's pretty fickle business, isn't it?
Well, there's other metrics, isn't there, particularly in schools, in terms of alumni relations and, how many people came to that celebration event where actually there was no ask involved whatsoever, but it was part of your longer term cultivation plan. So you're right, there's so much more to it, isn't there?
So to manage a good campaign manager, you need to have clear tasks or KPIs that you're working to. And that's often incorporated in your plan and your initial plan for the overall campaign. But it's such a pivotal role, and I think it's so often overlooked. And people have put too much weight, for example, on databases. I've got to speak English here, but that will actually supposedly manage your campaign for you, but they don't. No. It's such a personal business, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't ever see the day where there'll be an AI campaign manager.
Oh, there's a challenge for the future.
Tempting fate there. We're going to be at work.
I think AI could.
You could do a lot.
Could do a lot in terms of producing the plan and the actions, but ultimately, a machine isn't going to tell a major senior volunteer who's a busy person what to do. Not going to nag them.
So the other thing that happens, I've seen this with clients as well, they look at a campaign manager role like a sales role and they say, right, we'll remunerate them on a performance basis. So we'll pay them a percentage of the amount that they raise, or we'll pay them bonuses if they reach certain goals. What's your view on that?
I mean, we absolutely will not operate on that basis, will we? We've said before, this professional skill set, fundraising, and that deserves to be paid for. You don't pay your accountant on whether they cut you down enough tax or not, do you? On a commission basis. And, we all know it contravenes regulations here in the UK, and we don't want to be going into an ask by saying, hey, I'm going to take 20% of what you give me.
Absolutely. And the way I've always presented that when I've been asked by a client is that you present the scenario that says, okay, you, client, have got a £1 million donation from somebody. I, fundraising consultant, have had nothing to do with that. You've just happened to do it. But because we've got an agreement that I'm getting 20%, by the way, I want £200,000. Because that's what our agreement says. Now, you can go and tell the donor who's given you £1 million that actually he's only given you £800,000 because you've had to give 200. It just doesn't work.
No. It doesn't work.
It disincentivizes everybody.
Yeah.
I would much rather, as we do as an organisation, if we don't feel that we've given value for money.
We always give value for money, Chris.
No. Of course we do. But if for whatever reason we think we can do a little bit more and it's justified, we'll keep working. We don't walk away from clients. Our contract doesn't end and we go, that's it, right, you're paid up. Well, don't take the mickey, please, future clients of ours. We're not going to do it forever.
No, it's a partnership.
It's a partnership.
It's what we say.
And as any good partner will, you hold the hand until you think the job's been done or it's been done as much as it possibly can be.
Yeah.
And really, I saw a wave of commercial fundraising on a percentage base, would you believe, for very, very large green charities here in Britain back in the 80s and 90s, where up to 75% of what was being given to them was being taken by the fundraisers as their commission, in inverted commas. And it then bred, instead of doing feasibility studies as we do now, they would do studies on the basis of trying to work out who were the top 25 major donors to that organization. They wouldn't worry about going to see anybody else. They would just harass those top 25 and then take 75% of everything they gave. They made a fortune, and it's why today we now have the Charities Act, which means if you work in that way, the very first words that have you come out of your mouth, you need to say, I am going to be paid 75% of everything you might choose to give after this point. Amy Stevens, shall we now proceed? And usually that is the end of the first sentence and the last sentence, and we move on. So the Charities Act we've got is here to protect us from that. So when you employ campaign managers, don't think about them as salespeople and want to reward them on commission. Understand what will motivate them is actually around the same shared objectives as the volunteers. It's the achievement of the vision. It's that is their goal. That's what they're living and breathing for.
But also when you employ a campaign manager, don't expect that campaign manager to come in and deliver the whole campaign on their own.
No. It is a partnership.
Everything is a team. Everything's a partnership, and they're an essential part of that team. But they're nothing without. And
they don't have the access that the influential volunteers and ambassadors have, but they can help those influential volunteers and use that access to good effect. That's what they do.
I don't know. It sounds like we're pitching being a campaign manager as quite a hellish job here, doesn't it? But
it's huge fun.
It's great
huge fun.
And you can have so much fun.
Yeah.
My first ever campaign, I had a fantastic board who all gave, and we're all out there asking. And towards the end of the campaign, we'd actually beaten target. Didn't
you put it up at the victory party?
Yeah, we increased it by a third again. And we then had a competition amongst the team of who could get the highest gift and who was going to win the wooden spoon for the lowest gift.
Okay.
And did they put their heart and soul into it on both ends of
Yeah.
the scale because they wanted to win something. And it was great fun, you know.
But there's nothing more satisfying. You set out to raise £2 million and you reach and go through that £2 million barrier. And even though you're not taking the glory publicly for doing it, your client, the people who doubted whether the client could do it, have to shut up and have to acknowledge the client's done it. The client knows that you've done the job. And most importantly, you know that the campaign has been a success because you made it happen. And that gives you confidence. It also gives you professional credibility when you, on your CV, managed a successful campaign for £2 million. That means a hell of a lot more than managed a participation program that produced £50,000 a year.
Yeah. And actually, if you think about, as you do, as you get a bit older and you reflect over your career, those moments of campaign management are your legacy. They're the things you most often cherish and remember most closely. As you know, the guy who trained me, Everald Compton, an Australian, is still alive and still going, bless him, good on you, Everald. He used to take his family on busman's holidays, driving around, pointing at things, this cathedral in Grafton or that theatre, in that he had been involved in managing campaigns to make them happen, all around New Zealand as well. It's a wonderful, wonderful legacy. And you're very privileged as a campaign manager to work with visionary leaders, people that are passionate about doing this and it rubs off on you. It really affects you.
I was going to say, I think, yes, we did make it sound like it's really hard work, and it is hard work, but it is also great fun. Not only do you get to celebrate, but actually you do meet a hell of a lot of great, fantastic people along the way, people you ever laugh with, people you'll never forget. But you go to people's houses.
You go to places you would never, ever. Okay, reminiscing slightly, forgive me for this. One of the campaigns we ran years ago was at the school that provided the choir to St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle. And the governor of the castle, a retired general, was the campaign chairman. And as the campaign manager, I would go and meet with him in the tower, the Norman Tower, in the middle of Windsor Castle. And I'd be allowed to drive in and park next to the tower and go in for coffee with the general, who was a very agreeable but quite direct man. And I would have to wait while the guard changed. I have to wait in my car while the guard changed in front. And every time I'd phone my mum in Australia and I'd say, guess where I am today? I'm in Windsor Castle.
There's few other jobs where you do that.
There's
kind
no
of thing,
other
right?
no other job. And then you get to the party at the other end, when they raise the money and everyone just is so amazed at what's been achieved. And it's a very affirming process. It's one that I think many forget about, such an important role, being that insistent voice.
The three of us have been doing this collectively for 70, 80 years combined. We've worked for hundreds of clients between us. I suspect when we think about our careers, the moments that come back to us are those great moments of being a campaign manager when something either went horribly wrong or horribly well, or we met someone very funny, or it was, it was 5 minutes away from being the biggest disaster in the world, but I salvaged it. Those are the things that stick with you.
Yeah.
And we work for satisfaction. And one of the great things about being in fundraising is we see great projects being delivered. We see lovely buildings being built. We see more kids getting bursaries. We see fantastic, facilities being developed for people who are homeless or whatever it might be. But the reality is that we played a part in that. And the campaign manager of all people probably plays the greatest part in that.
I think we can fairly safely say, if you embark on a life in professional fundraising and you become a campaign manager, you will never, ever be bored, ever. No. There's always
tear your hair out sometimes, but you'll never be bored.
And equally, there's some times when you just want to do a jig around the floor in your office.
Yeah.
When that.
I'd like to just refresh your memory that I did have the Dean of Peterborough congering around the grounds of the.
There you go.
You did too.
Not the current Dean, the former Dean. We congered.
Charles,
yeah.
So that's a life moment.
If you can get a Dean to conger, it was a good moment.
I'm going to coin something new here. I actually think our campaign managers are like alchemists. There is a magic about what they can achieve by knitting together those volunteer leaders, by putting the energy and passion behind them to put the program in place so they can actually achieve their vision. It is an alchemist's role. It's very rewarding, and there's major, major legacies for the client for them in doing it. It's such an important role. But look, Amy and Chris, thank you again for sharing your wisdom today. I hope we've excited some new potential campaign managers.
Send it to every university career.
Yeah, it was never on offer, was it, as a career for us?
It should
but
be.
It's been an important subject for us to discuss today. It's a big part of the partnership in major gift and capital campaigns is this key role of campaign management. But thank you very much for your time. It's been great to see you both again. Safe journeys back to Leeds and to London. All the best. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks for pulling up a chair and joining our conversation today. Please share any comments or even pose some questions for future episodes by emailing us at inquiries@giftedphilanthropy.com.